Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to No Timeouts, a football show coming at you from the Score Studio. My name is Jonah Birenbaum. That is Dan Wilkins. That is Tyler MacKillop. That is Zak McDonald. You know them. You love them. The Super Bowl is behind us, gentlemen, which means that our pal Justin Boone won't be seen or heard from for months. But that's okay. We soldier on without him. And actually, speaking of breathers, this is going to be the last episode of No Timeouts for a little while. I know, it's sad, but don't you worry. We will be back talking ball before you know it. Anyway, enough housekeeping. Let's get on with the business. Holy crap. Super Bowl 59 is history, and wow, did it ever not go as we predicted. Everyone on this panel, well, T, you weren't here when we made our official predictions, but everyone else on this panel predicted that the Kansas City Chiefs would ride the Patrick Mahomes magic to an unprecedented third straight Super Bowl title, and instead, the Philadelphia Eagles absolutely rinsed them. It was a proper blowout. The Eagles defense suffocated Patrick Mahomes all game long. They sacked him 6 times. They generated 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. And Philly's offense executed on all fronts in an eventual 40-22 victory that didn't even feel as close as the score suggested. In fact, the game was pretty much over by halftime. And according to Sportico's Lev Akabis, we'll throw it up on the screen right there, Super Bowl 59 was the second least entertaining Super Bowl this century as defined by changes in win probability. It was a truly shocking game. We've never seen Mahomes and the Chiefs dynasty really get overwhelmed and outclassed like this, but that's enough out of me. We got to talk your guys' takeaways from Super Bowl 59. Wilkins, you're up first.
Yeah, mine's an oldie but a goodie. Defense wins championships. I mean, we spend so much time talking about quarterbacks in this league, and I get it. They're kind of important. But when guys like us can sit up here heading into the Super Bowl, looking at the tail of the tape, identifying that one team has an overwhelming talent advantage in every single category, and then still just default to picking the team with the best quarterback, it's gone a little too far. I mean, look, the Eagles just got after Mahomes. So it was just such a nice reminder that there's just more to a football game than a battle of the quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. They got after Mahomes from the jump. He was more uncomfortable than I've ever seen him in an NFL game, probably than I've ever seen him in a college football game. He just did not look like himself. It was just overwhelming, the pass rush. He was just in a position where he was trying to force the issue, like you said, 2 interceptions before half. That basically sealed the game. It was over from there. They were just that much better up front, and it's not like they were even doing anything overly creative. The Eagles did not blitz once the entire game. It was just oddly reminiscent to me of that Giants beating the Patriots back in 2007, the undefeated Patriots team. Just a 4-man rush, just overwhelming the offensive line, and just really giving an all-time quarterback no chance to do what he does best, and it was awesome.
30 pressures on 42 dropbacks is absolutely nuts. This was, by expected points, the worst game of Patrick Mahomes' entire career, regular season or playoffs, and he had 3 turnover-worthy plays, which was his most in a postseason game since 2019. They really brought out a Patrick Mahomes that we've never seen before. It was strange to see him look mortal, but that's a testament to how good this pass rush was. And T, you kind of called this, honestly.
I was going to say, you said it reminds you of the Patriots. Like, this reminds me more of what the Bucs did to this team a few years ago. Because they took the exact same blueprint in terms of didn't blitz. I mean, Bulls did maybe like less than 10% in that game. Fangio even less, and they both played a ton of zone. Did they play even one snap in man coverage that entire game? I'm pretty sure they did.
It was mostly zone. I think there were a couple of reps of man, but it was, the game plan was pretty clear.
And it's literally exactly what you said was going to happen.
It was identical, but I'm not going to. I was the one that said all these things, and then I went, I'll take the Eagles.
In the first half. You had the foresight, you had the insight, you just didn't have the courage, and that's okay. T, what was your big takeaway from Super Bowl 59?
The AFC needs to be taking notes. And it feels like they haven't been for this entire time that Mahomes has been on this run of Super Bowl appearances. The team you could say has taken notes might be the Houston Texans. Remember that they take C.J. Stroud and then they trade up to get Will Anderson, and then they paired him this year with Danielle Hunter. And quite frankly, the 2 teams that gave the Chiefs the most trouble was obviously the Eagles, giving the fact that they gave up 22 points, but it was probably if they had all their starters out there and giving full effort the full game, it would have been less. But the Texans only gave up 23 points. Pass rush is what wins you championships in my mind. Obviously, quarterback being number 1, but pass rush is number 2. And I think when you look at the Ravens and the Bills, they have just completely ignored that part of their roster build for the last, I don't know, for the Bills, it's been ever since Josh Allen has been around. You know that they have one pass rusher that has had double-digit sacks in a season his entire career. It's Leonard Floyd in 2023. Again, not someone they drafted or developed or took at a high price. Floyd was, I believe, a guy that they signed in the offseason at the time.
They tried with Von Miller.
Yeah, Von Miller was, again, at the later stages of his career. He hasn't produced at the level he did when he was at his peak and his prime. And then you look at the Ravens, they have taken one edge rusher in the first round the last decade. It was Odafe with the 31st pick a couple of years ago. And they've gone to guys like Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, Calais Campbell, all of these guys in the latter stages of their career that have had big seasons with them, but in those important moments at the end of the season and in the postseason have not shown up to the level they did in the regular season. And that's because they're not high-level talents like the guys that the Eagles have. And quite frankly, even with Mahomes, I don't even believe that an elite pass rush can beat him, because I think the Eagles' pass rush from 2022 was better than the one they have this year. Maybe some people will disagree with that, but it really also takes the fact that Mahomes' offensive line isn't perfect, because it wasn't in this iteration of the team this year, and it wasn't in the year that they lost to the Bucs. So if you're the Bills, if you're the Ravens, it's time to start investing real capital into the edge rusher position, and we'll probably get into it a little bit later if anyone's
the Chiefs are also going to lose Trey Smith this offseason, right?
Yeah.
So that offensive line is going to get even worse. So, yeah, you got to have a good pass rush to combat these great quarterbacks, and there's only a few teams that do it, and none of them do it as well as the Eagles.
And I think that segues perfectly into Zach's big takeaway from Super Bowl 59, which is...
The Chiefs need to make big improvements.
Yep.
The Chiefs have a lot of work to do on their roster. We talked about how we went down the roster and said the Eagles are better on every single level, but we still picked the Chiefs. My whole philosophy with this last year was I am going to pick the Chiefs until the Chiefs lose. But once the Chiefs lose, it's time to reevaluate, and the Chiefs lost, and it's time to reevaluate. They are behind the curve of the other teams that they're playing against. They've been saved by having Patrick Mahomes, but they don't have... The NFL is evolving in front of our eyes right now, I think, in a lot of ways. It's kind of going like Back to the Future a little bit, where it's like the Eagles have these dominant physical players in the middle of their defensive line. They're running the ball really well. They have just such great physical talent all around. And it is that defense win championships like you're talking about. It is that you're going to need to run the ball if you're going to want to win games. You can't trot out Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco anymore and expect to win Super Bowls when you have these other teams that have superstar athletes at every single position. And the Chiefs have to start getting to that level now. Travis Kelce, it's done. That's not happening anymore. He does not have the physical traits to compete with players. Rashee Rice was a huge loss for the Chiefs. I think if they had Rashee Rice, that would make a huge difference for them. But they need to get pass catchers that are elite. They need to get more defensive linemen that are going to be causing these same pressures, and they need to catch up with the rest of the league.
I think that they're fine. Like, I don't think that there's they've, like you said, they got to repair the offensive line. The Eagles are the exception in the fact that they made some really savvy moves to be able to draft Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, some trades to be able to move up in the first round.
Yep.
I mean, the Chiefs have been picking at the back end of the first for years now.
Which is a huge issue, right? Like,
yeah, it's
it
part
sucks.
of the problem.
It's not a huge issue when you're winning Super Bowls.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
To have continued success, if you're picking at pick 31, 32 every year, it's hard. You don't get Nolan Smith or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Then they've also spent some of those premium picks on some receivers, which I think were important for them if they're going to move on from
100%.
Travis Kelce. Rashee Rice, I think, is an extremely talented guy, and once he's back, he'll be their number one. And then they take Worthy, who really grew a lot the last 6-8 weeks of the year too. Now they need to take focus on the offensive line, probably someone to run with Chris Jones on the defensive line, and maybe some. I mean, the secondary's in a pretty good place. Like, they've drafted well. They've done a lot of good things well, but now it's probably more time to focus on the trenches as opposed to some of the shiny toys they had the last couple of years.
They got to hit on a running back in this draft. They got to identify a guy who can run the ball for them, because it's such a huge advantage to have Saquon Barkley making those big plays and being able to take some pressure off Patrick Mahomes, and the plotters that they have are just not working.
I think...
Also Tyreek Hill. I could see a Tyreek Hill reunion happening in the offseason.
Who knows, man? And I think it's clear that they can no longer just ride Patrick Mahomes' magic to Super Bowl titles in perpetuity. But I think irrespective of whatever they do to the roster, there's probably a not insignificant impact on the rest of the league in just seeing the Chiefs lose, reckoning with their own mortality. I think that's a pretty significant breakthrough as well, especially for those teams in the AFC who year after year have just been frustrated by this Chiefs team and Patrick Mahomes specifically. It's okay, we can finally do this now. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, that like psychologically there's kind of a flip that's been switched with this defeat.
I could kind of see it going the other way too, though, right? Because like if you're the Bills and you always lose to the Chiefs in the playoffs, and then they keep winning, you're like, well, they're the best team. But then if they don't win, you're like, oh, so we just can't beat them. So I don't know. I don't know about the psychological impact, but I'm with you. I think that they need to get better in some areas of the game. Kelsey retiring, which seems like it's on the table, would obviously be a huge thing for them. And I know the cost is coming due for Mahomes' contract. He had some low cap hits early on, but I mean they could keep
He'll
pushing
restructure
it.
probably.
They could
right?
do that. Ideally, you don't want to keep doing that again and
yeah.
again because you're going to set yourself up for failure down the road. But
it'd be great
it's
for
an
them to
interesting
get
situation,
Kelsey. It'd be great for them to get Kelsey's money off the books. Like I still think Travis Kelsey is like a solid player, but if this were Bill Belichick and not Andy Reid running this team, there's no chance Travis
He was
Kelsey
not
would
good in
be
the
there
Super
next
Bowl.
year.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be thinking this team's anywhere different than like our expectations for them should be the same going into next year. That
I'll
they
pick
should
them
be
to
a
win the
Super Bowl
Super Bowl.
favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I spent the whole playoffs
yeah.
picking every team against them until the Super Bowl. And then,
Speaking of expectations, what are your expectations now for newly minted Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts? Is he an elite quarterback in your mind, T?
You have to handle this type of conversation very
Delicately.
No, in short, I don't think this has elevated Jalen Hurts into being an elite quarterback. Now, I think we did learn a lot from Jalen Hurts, and he answered some questions when it came to especially, I think I talked about this a lot early in the season. I questioned how willing he was as a runner because I think it showed that there was legitimate injury concerns last year, and he ran the ball really, really well in the postseason for this team. When you're asking the question if a quarterback is elite, you have to strip down the parts and say, okay, let's look at the team that he plays for, or let's not take into account the team and roster around him, who he is as a quarterback. And I look at the Eagles and I say, the best offensive lineman in the league, the best running back in the league, and you could probably argue, I would argue they're the best receiving core in the league between Goddard, Smith, and A.J. Brown. Maybe you're going to say the Bengals were this past year. Maybe you're going to say the Vikings, another team like that. But I think that this is the best roster in the league, and he really benefited from that. He had his most efficient year as a passer, but it also on the backs of attempting the least amount of passes of his career as a starter. So when I look around the league, you have to ask the question of how many teams would swap their quarterback for Jalen Hurts. I think there's at least 10 teams in the league that would probably say they'd keep their quarterback.
10 teams?
Yeah.
What?
I mean, I could go off through the list off the top of my head.
There's more that goes into being an elite quarterback than I think like
I don't want to hear the winning thing. I don't care.
Well, I am going to say the winning thing.
So basically,
but it's like people don't want to hear the winning thing. You play to win the game.
Yep.
Like, and Jalen Hurts is like, his leadership means a lot. His ability to work through adversity and lead his team means a lot. It's still, these are the things that define the game. He won the Super Bowl, and every time he gets into the Super Bowl, he plays lights out.
Are you ready for this? Are you ready for me to say this? I think if they put Kenny Pickett in for that game, they would have won.
Oh my!
That is absolutely ludicrous.
I love that.
It's not because for one, his defense scored. The Chiefs. How many points do the Chiefs score if the defense did not pull their starters, and they actually played their style? They played the entire game for the entire 4 quarters.
But the Chiefs might not score any points.
The Chiefs wouldn't have scored 14 points, probably.
What does the Chiefs have to do? Scoring points have to do with Jalen Hurts?
Because the defense scored. The defense got another turnover. Jalen Hurts turned the ball over on a potential scoring drive as well. And I think operating this offense behind Saquon Barkley and all of those talented players they have as pass catchers, I think Kenny Pickett or even Tanner McKee could have done that.
But
Tanner McKee. We're not talking about Tanner McKee being better than Jalen Hurts.
No, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying those guys are better than Jalen Hurts, but this was a game won by their defense. It was not won by their offense.
If the Chiefs had won the Super Bowl, we would have attributed it invariably to Patrick Mahomes, even though Patrick Mahomes, statistically speaking, and I would say by the eye test, didn't have a superb season or playoffs. So I think there's something of an inconsistency there.
So Pat, I wish I had this number off the top of my head, but I remember reading this last year, and somebody actually was trying to clown me because I said that Patrick Mahomes was already the GOAT after the Super Bowl last year, and it was that Mahomes in the postseason, when he's trailing in less than 2 minutes, is like perfect. 7 for 7, I think he is.
He's the best.
That we could talk about intangibles of like being a winner, but I think there's intangibles about being able to execute every time you're called upon.
I think here's where I'm at with Hurts. I have always been in more on your side.
Yeah.
I think he's a good player, not an elite quarterback. I think that he has some struggles going through progressions from the pocket. He has some struggles under pressure.
Yep.
That said, he did just win Super Bowl MVP. He's very good at pushing the ball downfield, which is a perfect fit in this offense. He can run the ball well, and to your point, he's a good leader. So I think he's in that like 7 to 10 range, however you want to put it, and I think that's fair. I think if we're calling him like top 5 quarterback, because how could he not be, because he's a Super Bowl MVP, that's where I think he goes a little too far, because I think you identify guys like Justin Herbert or Matt Stafford or even potentially like a Stroud or Dak Prescott. If you put them in this offense, they're also winning the Super Bowl MVP, right? So
I disagree with that so much. Like,
if you put Herbert in this offense,
I
you
would
don't
not.
think they're
Justin the Eagles wouldn't be in the Super Bowl if they had Justin Herbert as their quarterback.
That's
Justin
crazy.
Herbert,
That's
every
insane.
time he has a chance to choke, he chokes.
Justin Herbert doesn't play in the quality of offense that Jalen Hurts does. The best offensive line in the league, the best running back in the league, who ran for 2,000 yards this year, and I would argue the best receiving core in the league. Justin Herbert's never had that.
We're doing an impromptu. Would you rather? Would you rather have? No, I'm serious. Would you rather have Jalen Hurts or Jared Goff?
For what? Give me the context
Next
of
season,
one season.
2025
next
season.
Okay.
Jalen Hurts or Jared Goff?
Hurts.
I'd rather have Jared Goff.
I would rather have Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, that's the correct answer. Okay, would you rather
Jared Goff
have?
threw like 93 interceptions in the playoff game that he lost this year.
Would you rather have Jalen Hurts or? Or Justin Herbert?
Herbert.
I'd rather have Justin Herbert.
I'd rather have Jalen Hurts by a country mile.
This is wild. Would you rather have Jalen Hurts or Jordan Love?
Jalen Hurts.
I'd rather have Jalen Hurts.
I really like Jordan Love,
Me too.
but I'll still take Jalen Hurts.
You can no, okay. Nope, not gonna get.
Would you?
triggered. Not
Would
gonna
you?
get triggered.
Okay. Would you rather have Jalen Hurts or Dak Prescott?
This is kind of a toss-up to me. Like, they're just two very different players. I think that Dak is a much better passer, Look, I don't want Eagles fans to come for me, so I'm going to take Dak for now. I'm going to take Jalen for now.
Clip it.
It slipped out. It
He
slipped
said
out
Dak.
how I really
no
felt.
takesies, backsies. He said Dak.
Social
T?
team's gonna have a heyday. I'm going to take Jalen Hurts. I made a list.
All right, that's sweet.
Like at the end of the week or early in the week, and Dak was not in front of him in my list, but I definitely thought about it.
I'll take Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts is number 5.
Okay, one more. Jalen Hurts or Jaden Daniels?
Ooh.
So when Daniels was coming out in the draft, I believe my comp was skinny Jalen Hurts. I think they're a very similar player. I think that Jaden Daniels has like really shown growth from what he was at LSU. So I'm very high on him, but because it's only been 1 year, I'll stick with Jalen Hurts.
See, I'm disagree with that in that I think Jaden is better than Jalen Hurts in every way, and I know it's crazy. I know it could sound crazy to say that because it's been 1 year, and CJ Stroud is coming off a down year in a sophomore year, but I would take both of those guys over Jalen Hurts.
See, this is a weird one. I'm with T on this one. I think I would take Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels has that similar ability in those.
So
I would rather it would be a toss up. Like, I'd rather have Jaden Daniels in year 3 than Jaden Daniels in year 2. But
just next year.
But I would probably take Jaden Daniels.
So, basically you think that Jalen Hurts' historically good resume through his age 26 season is largely a function of the team surrounding him as opposed to his ability to elevate.
I hate that you're making me say these things. I just don't want to be
Well, it's a crazy good resume.
No, I appreciate. I
At least through the lens of
understand
wins.
that Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think this season and the playoffs and the tail end of this regular season elevated him how I think about him, but it doesn't mean that I think he's elite. And yes, I do think his resume and what he's built over the course of his career so far is a product of one of the best rosters in football throughout his career.
Okay. Speaking of...
I loved that, by the way.
Speaking of individuals who may or may not be elite, Zach, what does this win mean for Nick Sirianni's reputation, his legacy? Is he now an elite head coach?
That's a great question because I am not a fan of Nick Sirianni. Just his personality that I see portrayed on the camera. I don't know him obviously as a human being, but I'm not a fan. But now he's won a Super Bowl. But the weird thing is, like, the Eagles don't operate in the same way that other teams operate, where I'm not sure that he was the one who picked Fangio and Kellen Moore as his coordinators. I think
he was not.
I think Howie Roseman was the guy that picked those for him.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Eagles had the weird situation where they won the Super Bowl a few years back, and they had Doug Peterson, and he was weirdly kind of like a figurehead coach, and they got rid of him, and it just didn't matter at all. They just kept on going, and then Doug Peterson goes to the Jags and doesn't have a very good tenure there. And it could be a similar situation with Nick Sirianni, where he is just being the head coach when they don't really need him to be the head coach. They could fill somebody in and do that spot and probably win all of the same. But that being said, as we had in the last conversation, I am a big fan of winning. And you have to say that Nick Sirianni, his ability to adapt, his ability to trust his coordinators is his biggest strength. He lets people do what they need to do. He's very aggressive in his time management and going for it on fourth downs. And he sort of galvanizes that team in the way with his attitude. So I think he is a really good coach.
If you're going to discredit Jalen Hurts for the Eagles' success,
You would.
I think you need to necessarily attribute it to Nick Sirianni, because he recognizes the strengths of his team, how to operate the offense and the defense to put them in positions to succeed. And look, 4 years as a head coach, he has a winning percentage over 700. He's been to 2 Super Bowls and he's won 1. We may not like the way he presents, but we have to evaluate coaches through the lens of wins and losses, because we simply don't have the insight to see how they work behind the scenes. How can you not say he's a top head coach?
I think that I think I came to this realization on Sunday of watching A.J. Brown have like a bit of a diva moment while they're winning by 3 scores. I was like, okay, doesn't matter who the coach is. I don't think anyone can handle this guy, because I've never seen anyone complaining like that while they're about to win the Super Bowl. So I'm definitely easing the stance on Sirianni. I think he's a good head coach. I just think this roster was so good.
I'm not a huge fan of Sirianni, but like just looking historically, like has there ever been a bad head coach who's won a Super Bowl? I can't think of one off the top of my head. So
Barry Switzer.
But this is wild, though. They just beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and it's like, yeah, I'm not crazy about Hurts. Yeah, I'm not like the biggest fan of Sirianni. It's like, it can't all just be Saquon Barkley.
That's a credit to the team and the roster and every player on that. Like,
Howie.
I said during the Super Bowl, Howie
Roseman
Roseman should have
is
won
the real
Super Bowl
Super Bowl
MVP.
Howie's the GOAT.
Yeah, he's the MVP.
Okay. Well, speaking of Howie Roseman and the team that he's assembled, how are you feeling about this Eagles team moving forward, Wilk?
yeah, I mean, my other takeaway is that I think this may only be the start for the Eagles. And I know that we can pretty easily convince ourselves of that for any Super Bowl champion. I mean, there's a lot of hype and excitement right after the game, but like this feels like a pretty unique situation, right? Like we just talked about the offense, like it's basically a cast of the Avengers, right? Like you said it, best offensive line in the league, best receiving core in the league, best running back in the league, Hurts, top 10 quarterback, I think we all agree. And all those guys, their key contributors are locked in for the next few years. But then on the defensive side, that was the best defense in the league this year. We saw what they did to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. And their best players, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, are all in their first 2 seasons. Yeah. And then you have the defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, who I personally don't see as like a risk to leave for a head coaching job at the age of 66. He's already done it once before. Yeah. I think he's there long term. So that defense was already as good as it was. It's probably only going to get better. And especially so if Howie Roseman keeps drafting the way he has recently. And you look at the cap situation, make no mistake, the bill will come due at some point for the way they've structured these contracts, putting those void years on the end. But the way they've done it so far, they have created a window for themselves where they can continue to be aggressive and really chase down a couple Super Bowls over the next few years. I don't know if that creates an opportunity to go after someone like Myles Garrett this offseason. It sounds crazy, but we probably shouldn't be surprised. Like Howie Roseman loves taking swings like that. So either way, I think this is going to be a really fun few years in Philly and decidedly less so for the rest of the NFC.
Yeah, wow. I think that's the perfect segue point into our next conversation, because that was great stuff. Love all those reflections on Super Bowl 59. But now all 32 teams are in off-season mode, and unless you're maybe the Eagles, but maybe not, there's work to be done to get your roster in shape for 2025. So, gentlemen, you got to tell me what is going to happen this offseason. I want some bold predictions for free agency, for the draft, and potentially for trades. T, we'll let you go first right now.
Yeah. It's got to do with Myles Garrett. It's got to do with the Cleveland Browns. I'm not saying this would be a good idea, but I could definitely see it happening. It's the Browns not drafting a quarterback with the number 2 pick and instead signing Kirk Cousins. I don't know why there are rumors that they would trade for Kirk Cousins. I don't know what
no chance.
front office in the entire league would ever make a trade for him right now, considering the lack of leverage the Falcons have. But when I look at the Cleveland Browns as they are currently assembled, I think they were the best 3-14 team I've ever seen in my entire life in terms of quality of roster.
The Deshaun Watson effect.
Yeah. So
The Jameis Winston effect.
when I take into account what they have on the roster and the age, when you look at the offensive line, guys like Joel Bitonio, there's a lot of guys in like Ethan Posich is in his 30s. Like all these guys will be in their 30s. They're in the latter stages of their career, but they're still under contract. They're still going to be with the team heading into next year. Then you look at some of the pieces in the secondary that are going to be up for raises and looking for another contract. Greg Newsome's one of those guys. This team is not in a great place to draft a rookie quarterback and be able to sit and wait on his development to compete, because by the time in 3-4 years they think he might be ready, whether it's Cam Ward or a Shadur Sanders, and maybe you're lucky enough that they do hit and they're a great player, but that's not always the case. Is Jimmy Haslam willing to basically enter another rebuild? Because you look at Myles Garrett, who now wants out of town. If you let him go, that's going to have a significant impact on your defense. So what you could do is, if you do trade him, you're probably going to be getting I would hope you're getting a first-round pick for him. You could just draft his replacement in Abdul Carter, or maybe you draft Abdul Carter anyways, and it makes Myles Garrett want to stick around to have a partner in tandem with him, and look to a guy like Kirk Cousins to play behind an offensive line that hopefully is healthier next year. They were not healthy at all this year, and a defense that is really, really good. So there's a lot of options for Cleveland. This potentially could be one of them. I don't know if it would be a good idea, but I could definitely see them deciding.
I will add to this, and I agree. I think it's a good idea. One, the Deshaun Watson contract is getting in the way of everything, right? He's going to be on the books for over $70 million this year. Kirk Cousins is in such a unique situation where when he gets released by the Falcons, which I think we all agree will happen, he still has $27.5 million guaranteed coming to him from the Falcons this year. So he is going to be in a Russell Wilson situation where he's going to be taking a league minimum contract with his next team. I don't know, like, Kirk Cousins might be washed. Your reaction to the original idea kind of speaks to that. However, I will point out that this past season, he did say, and it might just be rationalizing the way he played down the stretch, but he did say that in Week 10 he suffered like a shoulder and arm injuries, and he was playing through that from that point on. If we are to believe that, from weeks 1 to 9, he was actually 7th in EPA per dropback. He was playing a lot better before that point. So if I'm a team like the Browns or whoever else needs a quarterback, I'm willing to take this gamble that Kirk Cousins could bounce back after an offseason to get healthy. He'd be another full year removed from that Achilles tear. Maybe he can recapture some of that previous form. And again, it's zero risk on that contract. If he's bad in training camp, you can just cut him. But I'd take a shot on him for sure.
Yeah, and the Stefanski connection is obvious. There's a reason why he would come there too, from his perspective.
You rarely hear about guys going to Cleveland to revive their career. Is the thing. It's kind of the last stop before the glue factory.
Yeah. And I will say, if his arm strength is going, like, you probably don't want to be playing outdoors in Cleveland, so that may not be the best option for him, but it's something that the team should consider.
All right. What's your bold prediction, Wilk?
I've got the Steelers trading for Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford.
Whoa.
So we know that Cooper Kupp is on the block. Obviously, that would be a natural fit with the Steelers. They need a receiver desperately to go opposite George Pickens, assuming he's still there. But they also need a quarterback. I think Matt Stafford is a little less likely to go than Kupp, but it does seem like it's trending in that direction a little bit. They had their contract talks
There's a lot of heat to that.
They had their contract talks last offseason. They dragged on for a pretty long period of time, and I think that maybe speaks to the fact that the Rams aren't super excited about committing to a 37-year-old quarterback long term.
Kelly Stafford's putting out crazy Instagram cryptic messages.
I'm really high on Stafford. I still think he's a baller. I would love to have him if I'm a team that needs a quarterback, but I can see why the Rams might want to go younger, especially if they can get something in a trade for him. I don't know what it would cost the Steelers. It's probably at least a first-round pick for Stafford and then a couple day 3 picks for Kupp. But I'd be coming in hot for both if I'm them. I don't understand how they would get a quarterback any other way. And with this team every year surprising everyone by going to the playoffs, getting everyone excited that Mike Tomlin just does not lose, and then doing exactly that in the playoffs every year, like, they got to do something different. So I'd be going for this.
You want to know who's on the top quarterbacks list ahead of Jalen Hurts?
Matt Stafford?
Matt Stafford.
Oh, my God.
I actually have my quarterback tiers coming out tomorrow.
Wow.
If we want to rehash
Plug.
this, if we want to rehash this a little bit, it's the top 4. The four, I think everyone
obvious,
is there.
Yeah.
And then Herbert, and then Stafford. And then I went Hurts because of with respect to the season he had in the Super Bowl MVP. But like to your point, I do think the guys that are behind him, like the
Stroud, Daniels.
Dak, you can kind of like order that group however you want. But
we had that like big
that's
heated
how it
argument.
shapes
We're
out.
all like 2 spots off on like
Yeah,
where Jalen
it's-
Hurts is. Like it's not really. I would have him above Herbert and Stafford.
Yeah.
Stafford, I would have Stafford also above Herbert as well. I think Stafford,
That's fair. I mean,
he looked awesome. Like especially down the stretch in the playoffs. Like when the Rams were in the playoffs, I was like, oh, they could represent the NFC.
That's why I
they
think
were-
he's such an interesting trade candidate because, like, you know, he's being tied to the Giants a lot. Like, I don't really get that. I don't see how the Giants are going to compete right now. To me, the Steelers are the most obvious fit. But yeah, I'm fascinated to see if he gets traded because there would be teams lining up for him.
Well, let's talk about the Giants because your bold offseason prediction is.
That Aaron Rodgers is going to be the one that goes to the Giants.
Oh my God!
He doesn't need to find a new house, right?
That's part of it. That's part of it. I think he doesn't want to find. I think it would be great for him to not have to find a new house. I think it is a situation of desperation meeting desperation, where it's like I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be surprised that he does not have a very hot market out there for him, especially with guys like Stafford and Cousins available. I don't think people are going to be rushing to get Aaron Rodgers. And then you have another situation with Brian Dable and Joe Shane, who like when the offseason hot seat rankings come out, they will be number 1 on those hot seat rankings. The Giants need to win, and they need to win right now. Otherwise, both those guys are out on the street. So Aaron Rodgers doesn't have to move. He stays in New York. You have Malik Neighbors. He'll bring Devontae Adams with him.
Yep.
And they'll run that offense in New York. Brian Dable, a really experienced coach, versatile system. He's worked with Tom Brady in the past. I think Dable's a really good offensive play coordinator. And as always, when you make predictions to anything, even tangentially related to the New York Jets, you imagine what is the worst pain that could possibly be received by Jets fans. And Aaron Rodgers succeeding in the exact same
Don't
city,
worry, you don't have
in
to
the
worry about
exact
that.
same stadium would be the pain.
You don't have to worry about that. That will not happen. For one, if this ever happened, he would not be successful with the New York Giants.
Would you rather have Cousins or a Rodgers?
I would rather employ Spencer Rattler. I'm not joking.
I actually think
never want.
Rodgers to the Giants is the perfect fit because it would allow him to continue his darkness retreat through the entire football season. Right? That's essentially what it is.
Rodgers was pretty good last year. He was pretty good at
I
the
don't know
end
if
of the
I'd say
season.
good, but there were flashes of
He
where
was
you're like,
cromulent
okay,
at
like
times,
and
especially down the stretch once the Jets were already out of it.
It's the year after the Achilles. I know he's like 42 or whatever, but it's the year after the Achilles that guys usually bounce back a little bit better. And he's just a guy that's he's fueled by rage. I think the rage could fuel him.
Well, I will say John Mara will probably lose a lot of sleep if he doesn't land Aaron Rodgers. So I suppose it's truly a match made in hell. It's perfect.
I would
think
personally
it's-
prefer if the Steelers can't get Stafford. I think that they make the most sense for Rodgers. And the whole like you can bring Devontae, it would work.
That's the desperate move
The
that
Giants
makes
are a
sense.
little. I don't know. Like, are you really going to compete with Aaron Rodgers anyway? Maybe that's just their desperation move. To your point, trying to keep their jobs. I will say that signing Aaron Rodgers, knowing that you would only be keeping him for maybe 1 year, it wouldn't stop you from drafting a quarterback. And I know that
he said
Jordan
it.
Love has spoken very highly of the influence Aaron Rodgers had on him. So I don't know if you
Do both.
sign Rodgers and draft Shador, it could work. I don't
I know Dable made the playoffs like just a few years ago, but I think if he wants to keep his job, he needs to play some sort of long game. It's like in college, a lot of coaches will do this where they have a freshman quarterback that's a big freshman they signed, and it kind of buys them some time. Dable needs something that can buy him some time because I don't think this is a team where you get any of these veterans in, like even a Stafford, and you're going to immediately be like, okay, we can go 9-8 this year or something
way.
like that.
Especially playing in that division where you have the reigning Super Bowl champ and you got
Yeah.
the Commanders on the up and
yeah.
up, and it's tough. No matter which quarterback they end up with. Okay, sticking with the theme of free agency, gentlemen, it's safe to say that the Eagles' edition of Saquon Barkley was by far last offseason's best signing. They gave him a 3-year deal with an AAV of less than $13 million, and he turned in one of the best seasons ever by a running back. Helped them to a Super Bowl title, obviously. So I want to know who is going to be the Saquon Barkley of this offseason, which is to say, who's going to be the relatively low-cost free agent addition that pays off massive dividends for his new team. Wilk, who you got?
The closest comparison I can come up with, including position specific, is Nick Chubb. I know he's a little older. He's obviously not like the same young superstar that you'd be signing, but in my mind, he was the best running back in football before his devastating knee injury. So that is a bit of a concern looking to the future, but he did come back in week 7 of this past season. So the way I see it, if you give him a full off season to get healthy, there's a chance he could recapture at least close to the level of play that he was enjoying before that. I think if he does, and you add him to an offense like the Chiefs, we were talking earlier about their need for a running back, I think you can make that group pretty unstoppable, I guess, until they get to the Super Bowl and play the Eagles again. But look, I love Nick Chubb, and I wouldn't rule out him like coming back from the injury. I think he's an incredible player.
Nick Chubb is giving me like Marshawn Lynch Raiders right now. That's what that's the kind of feeling that
you can sign me up for that. Yeah.
I don't know, man. 30-year-old running back coming off a devastating knee injury, and like, man.
Listen, you asked for a signing that would exceed expectations and really put a team over the top.
I guess because the expectations have to be low after a season where he averaged 3.3 yards per carry.
Yeah,
and was bottom 10 in the NFL.
Saquon had sub 4 yards per carry seasons in New York before he came. I think that the way you described, if he went to a great offense like the Chiefs, for example, I think the Broncos would be an offensive line he could run well behind. Then I could still see this happening. Obviously, the injury is going to give him the low tag.
And
we're
age.
Not talking about Saquon
30-year-old
Barkley
running
price.
back.
Yeah.
And he was bottom 10 in the NFL in rush yards over expected per attempt this season. Like, it's not a lot of encouraging indicators.
I mean, a big part of it is that he's not going to get paid much at all, right? So it's a
I see where you're
gamble.
going. I see where you're going. It's like maybe he bounces back, and it's like he's at least touched that high ceiling before, so maybe he can touch it again.
He was so good, man.
He was
amazing.
He
was the best in the league.
He was amazing. No gloves, too. I love a no-glove guy.
And in Cleveland, no less. I mean, it gets cold in the dog pound. T, who's your this offseason Saquon?
Yeah, I'm going to go low cost as well with Marquise Brown. I don't know how much you guys heard this in the later part of the season when he was coming back, because he did miss the entire year, basically. The Chiefs said they had some really big plans for him, and he looked really, really good in training camp. I would have loved to have seen what that had looked like. And he didn't really get completely involved in this offense in the later part of the year, but this is a former 1,000-yard receiver, someone who made a pretty big impact with the Ravens. I think if he's on the field and he goes to a talented team, much like Saquon did, I think his impact could really be felt. It just depends on where it is. Like maybe a place like Cincinnati, if they let T. Higgins go, which I don't think they'll be able to keep him around. I think he could be another, 1,000-yard guy again for a second time in his career.
If I had to guess, I'd say he's just back in Kansas City. If they're that high on him and he's not going to be any more expensive than he was last offseason, which was already a cheap deal, they might as well run it back and see if they can actually capitalize on those plans they have for him.
I feel like every year though there's like a bunch of Marquise Brown training camp stories that come out. That's like Marquise
training
Brown,
camp is full of storylines. Yeah.
Just Marquise Brown is like one of those guys. Like he has been hyped up a lot, and like he's never really delivered on a high level. But I think
I would. Would you rather take a shot on him or DeAndre Hopkins or Stephon Diggs?
Definitely Hollywood Brown.
For sure.
Yeah, by far.
Zach, who's your this offseason Saquon?
Again, this is a really tough challenge because, like, I don't think there is a Saquon like that. Like, he's like that was crazy and like he was amazing. But if I had to pick somebody, I would pick Najee Harris, who like got his 5th-year option declined. He's a free agent. I know the Steelers are interested in bringing him back right now, but he is one guy that he came out of obviously college really hyped. He's had 1,000 yards every year. He does look kind of slow. He does look kind of like a plotter, but we've never really seen him in kind of one of these new advanced running systems. So I think that if somebody had a real vision for him and maybe ran one of those like Shanahan McVay type systems and plugged him in there, he could have a really similar impact where it's like, could I see Najee go for 1,500 yards next year? Like I definitely could see that happening somewhere. And I think he could be a really impactful player, and he's still young.
Yeah, and he's never really played in an offense that had even like a above average quarterback, right? Like it's been tough sledding, I think, for Pittsburgh offensively.
I was reading like a free agency ranking, and they had Najee Harris at like 64, like the 64th best available free agent, and it's like I don't know. I think Najee's
just running back hate, man.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Good stuff, gents. Look, I know the streets of Philadelphia are still soaked with champagne, but that's not going to stop us from already looking ahead to next year's Super Bowl 60, San Francisco Bay Area. I need them. Give me your way too early predictions who's going to win Super Bowl 60 and who are they going to beat? Wilk, you're up first.
I've spent half the show talking about how great the Eagles are going to be for the next few years, so I can't pick against them. And I spent the entire season talking about how great the Ravens are right now. So Eagles over Ravens.
Love it. T?
I think you mentioned Myles Garrett to potentially to Philadelphia. I think the Lions are a team on the table, and I think their roster will match up just as well as if they were to make a big acquisition like that, especially so. So I like the Lions, and I'm not going to sit here and throw any more shade on the Chiefs, so I think they can get back.
So you're not concerned about the Lions losing Ben Johnson at all?
I think that I think the difference will be this coming year is that their talent will be at that higher level and overcome the potential deficiencies coaching-wise.
Lions over Chiefs. Okay, Zach?
I'm just a Joe Burrow guy. I'll just always be a Joe Burrow guy, and I think that I'm going to go with the Bengals. I think I said over the Eagles. I don't really care who's in the NFC. I don't really care who that is.
Defense guy,
doesn't matter. I know it really is like it's one of those like it's a choice that I like made, and then I was like, that makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah, but I just like Joe Burrow. I just think that I think he's a cut above the even Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So I'll trust him, and I wish it was with a better organization. The Bengals just don't spend in free agency; they don't do things right. But I believe in Joe Burrow.
I'm so interested to see what happens with that team because it already seems
The
like
media
Joe
tour he was
Burrow is
doing.
like preemptively getting upset about the way they're going to handle this offseason. So yeah.
Well, if they couldn't figure things out with Jamar in the lead up to before his contract year, which was and getting him at a potential discount because of Burrow not playing the second half of the season, I can't see them getting something done with T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson as they're about to walk.
Definitely not both.
Yeah. I don't have confidence that the Bengals are going to put themselves in a position to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender next year. But I will say, I'll repeat, the dam has broken in the AFC. The Chiefs are no longer this unbeatable, unstoppable, immortal force. I think that's
I don't know
meaningful.
about that.
So I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. Oh, no, I'm kidding. I have the same Super Bowl matchup as you, Ravens-Eagles, but I have the Ravens beating the Eagles. Look, the dam is broken. It's Baltimore's time. They've been on the precipice for so long. This team sent 11 players to the Pro Bowl this year, which is just crazy. They could have easily won the Super Bowl
And they
if
lost
Mark
in the
Andrews.
divisional round.
I'm aware. If Mark Andrews doesn't drop that 2-point conversion, who knows what happens.
Yep.
This offense is obviously among the most dangerous in the league. I don't need to tell you that Lamar is playing at just a stupid level, and he could have easily won his third MVP award this year. I'm going with the Ravens to beat the Eagles next season. But
I thought you were going to go with the Bills.
I thought about it. It's probably going to be the Chiefs, but for the sake of this exercise, I want to divvy it up a little. Great stuff, gentlemen. There's only one thing left to do. You know what time it is. It's trivia time. Here we go. Newly minted Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts is now one of just 9 players in NFL history with 4 or more career touchdowns in the Super Bowl.
Oh, God.
Name the other 8. I'll give it to you one more time. Newly minted Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts is now one of just 9 players in NFL history with 4 or more career touchdowns in the Super Bowl. Name the other 8.
You mean passing?
No, he means rushing and receiving.
This guy scores touchdowns, man.
Okay.
His tush is getting pushed on the reg.
Like totaled
I feel
in all
bad
the
about the
Super
way I
Bowls that they've
phrased
played.
that, but yes, 4 or more
the reg, he
touchdowns,
said.
not passing touchdowns.
Okay.
Touchdowns. Wilk, you have first pick.
Jerry Rice.
Correct. He's got more touchdowns in the Super Bowl than anyone else. He's got 8 of them, which
People
is just
forget.
stupid. People do forget.
I would hope they wouldn't.
Do people forget
People
about
forget about the greatest
People
wide receiver
forget
of
about
all
Jerry
time,
Rice being
bar
good in
none.
Super Bowls.
Yeah. And also, just know we got the buzzer, and I'm ready to use
Locked
it.
in.
T, you're up.
Rob Gronkowski.
Correct. He is tied for second with 5 touchdowns lifetime in the Super Bowl. Zachy?
All right. Those are, I feel like, the 2 obvious ones that you're going to go with. Give me... Ooh, I got some weird ones in my mind. Give me... Emmitt Smith.
Correct. He is tied with Rob Gronkowski for second with 5 career touchdowns in the Super Bowl. All right, those are the top 3, gents. You're going to have to start digging deep.
Franco Harris.
Correct. He's got 4 career touchdowns in the Super Bowl. Does Franco Harris? Big pull.
Julian Edelman.
Dang.
Whoa.
Oh, you get the triple buzzer.
A great guess. He was a Super Bowl MVP. He does not crack this list. Julian Edelman is incorrect. T, you're out. 2-horse race.
All right. Give me 4 straight Super Bowls. Thurman Thomas.
Correct.
Nice.
Thurman Thomas is on the list. He scored 4 touchdowns in those 4 fruitless trips to the Super Bowl for the Buffalo Bills. Wilk.
This is a new round?
This is a
I
new
started,
round. You
right?
went
Okay.
first.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that any Patriots running backs
I know, I was
stuck
thinking.
around long enough.
I don't think so either.
Okay. Roger Craig.
Correct.
Wow, that was such a good
Unbelievable
one.
pull. He's got 4 touchdowns in 3 career trips to the Super Bowl. Wow. Only 2 names left on the list. Zachy, you're up. What a game. This is an
Very good.
all-timer.
I would have had none of these.
All right. Give me the guy. TK, Travis Kelce. Damn it.
That was a good guess.
Damn it. Damn it.
Incorrect. Travis Kelce is not on the list, which means that Dan Wilkins is the champion, back on top once again. Little round of applause here for our boy D. Wilk. The 2 guys you missed, James White. I'm
Whoa.
surprised you guys didn't
Wouldn't
get James
have
White
gotten
because I
him,
think
yeah.
he scored 3 touchdowns
He did.
in
Yeah.
Was it the Falcons
against the
comeback?
Falcons.
Yeah.
Yeah, including the game winner in overtime. And then another quarterback on this list, John Elway.
Oh, never would
4
have gotten that.
touchdowns
Oh.
for John
I
Elway.
never would have got John Elway.
That was one heck of a game, though. Really, you earned that one.
I was,
I couldn't stop thinking about LeGarrette Blunt
Yeah?
because he was on both the Pats. and
That's true.
Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
Would have been a good
my
guess.
next guess would have been Michael Irvin, so I would have been out.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow.
I'm surprised Kelsey hasn't have 4 touchdowns in Super
Yeah.
Bowls, but
That's how she goes. Maybe if they had performed a little bit better on Sunday, this list would have been different. Who knows? Anyways, thank you so much for checking in for this episode of No Timeouts, a football show. Once again, that's Zak McDonald. That's, what's your name? Tyler MacKillop? That's Tyler MacKillop. That's Dan Wilkins. My name is Jonah Birenbaum. We'll see you soon.